Susan laughed at the man she once called husband in front of everyone, as if his shame were the toast of the night. And Walter understood right there that this party wasn't an invitation, it was a trial. Many people know this pain. The person works their entire life, does what's right, holds things together, loses sleep, and is still treated like someone who hasn't succeeded. And it hurts because it's not just about money, it's about being respected. It's about not becoming a joke just because the clothes are simple, the hands are calloused, and the manner is from the countryside. Walter had separated quietly, without scandal. He swallowed the hurt and went back to the ranch, where at least the day begins and ends with truth. But that night he realized that Susan didn't just want to have moved on. She wanted him to stay behind, very small, so the new husband could shine brighter, until a detail appeared, a detail that no one there had seen coming. Not Susan, not Oliver, the rich husband who spoke loudly and smiled like someone who never owes anything to anyone. A detail capable of turning gazes, silencing laughter, and making people swallow hard. And when the truth began to appear, the planned humiliation would transform into the biggest surprise of that house, the kind that changes the atmosphere of the place in seconds. Stay until the end to see how Walter, who entered there being treated as less, would end up leaving as someone impossible to ignore. If this story grabs you, leave a like to help the channel reach more people, and comment below if this is the first video you're watching from the channel and from which city you're watching. And subscribe so you don't miss the next stories. Walter took a deep breath, adjusted his simple shirt collar, and took the first step. Walter received the invitation on a hot afternoon, one of those where the sun seems to touch the roof. The paper was nice, thick, with fancy lettering. Susan's name came first, and Oliver's right below, as if it were a seal of victory. Wedding party, new house, celebration of the new phase. Walter spent some time looking at it on the table. He wasn't angry. He had a question. Why? Susan hadn't spoken to him in months. When she did, it was always about quick, dry matters and ended before it began. Sometimes she didn't even look him in the eyes when they met by chance in town. He thought about tearing up the invitation and throwing it away. It wouldn't be an insult. It would be protection. But Irene, his mother, saw the envelope and picked it up carefully, like someone picking up something delicate. "Are you going?" she asked. Walter didn't answer immediately. He went to the window, looked at the yard, saw the dust still in the corner and the clothesline full. Life was simple there, and he liked that. After the divorce, he had come to like having little. Not because it was little, but because it was clean. "I don't know," he said. Irene was quiet for a few seconds, then spoke without raising her voice. "You don't need to go to please anyone, but you also don't need to live hiding." Walter turned to her. "I'm not hiding, Mom. I know. You work, you support your life, but there's one thing you've done since you were a boy. When they hurt you, you try to pretend it didn't hurt, and that gets tiring." Walter swallowed hard. Irene had a way of speaking like someone who doesn't accuse, just illuminates. The divorce had been a wound without noise. At the beginning of the marriage, Walter and Susan were like two young people full of plans. Small house, simple furniture, and the hope of increasing the herd little by little. She laughed easily back then. He liked her laughter because it made the world seem less heavy. Then came the difficult years, a period of little rain, weak pasture, high expenses. Walter made mistakes in his calculations, bought at the wrong time, trusted promises that weren't kept, and when he saw it, he was drowning in worry. Susan began to be ashamed of the hardship. Not of the hardship itself, but of what people were saying. She began to compare herself with other women in town, with lives that seemed ready. And Walter, who had always been a man of little theatre, didn't realize in time that the problem was no longer just money. It was wounded pride. In their last argument, Susan spoke with cold eyes, as if she had already rehearsed it. "I don't want to die, waiting for your improvement. I'm tired." He tried to talk, promised to organize everything, asked for time, but time is something a person gives when they still want to stay. Shortly after, Susan appeared with Oliver, and Oliver was the opposite of Walter. Aligned clothes, easy conversation, wide smile. He liked to be heard. He liked to enter a place and make it seem like the place got better because of him. Walter, instead of fighting, went back to the ranch, cut expenses, fixed what could be fixed, did what he always knew how to do, work. Jared, the oldest man working with him, became more than an employee. He became his right hand. He was the type of person who doesn't speak beautifully, but speaks correctly. "Boss, this year we don't grow by shouting, we grow calmly," Jared would say. Walter learned to negotiate without hurry. He stopped buying on impulse, started selling better. He joined an association of producers in the region, more to learn than to appear. And things slowly fell into place. It wasn't a miracle, it was discipline. That same week of the invitation, Walter received a phone call that made the situation even stranger. A female voice, polite, said she was from the party organization and needed to confirm his attendance. "Mr. Walter Wright, your presence is important," the woman said. "Important why?" he asked. There was a short silence. "To avoid misunderstandings," the voice replied. Walter hung up and kept thinking about that phrase. Misunderstanding at a party. A party shouldn't be simple. He didn't tell Irene everything. He just said, "I'm going to stop by, just to close this inside me." Irene nodded and put her hand on his shoulder. "Go your way. Don't go trying to be someone else. And if you realize it's a trap, you leave," Walter promised. On the night of the party, he wore the best shirt he had, simple, well-ironed, clean boots, even worn. He took the car and went to Houston with a firm heart, but with an uncomfortable feeling, as if someone had set a time for him to feel shame. And he didn't know yet, but there were people in that house waiting for exactly that. Walter hadn't even entered yet, and the party already seemed prepared to put him in a place smaller than he was. Oliver's house was on a high part, with a well-kept garden and elaborate lighting. It wasn't just a house, it was a declaration. Everything seemed made to impress. The wide entrance, the aligned tables, the beautiful chairs, the clear and elegant decoration. Walter parked a bit far away, because the closer spots were already full of large, gleaming cars. He walked calmly to the gate, hearing conversations and laughter. It wasn't envy, it was strangeness. It seemed like everyone there needed to prove something. Right at the entrance, a woman with a clipboard asked for his name. Her smile was correct, but it wasn't warm, it was professional. "Name?" she asked. "Walter?" The woman looked for it on the list with too much attention, as if his name were an uncomfortable item. "Right, you can enter," she said. Walter entered and felt the first blow, without words, several quick glances up and down, measuring his clothes and boots. The same type of look he had already seen in town, but there it seemed stronger, because he was surrounded by similar people doing the same thing. He spotted Susan near a central table. She was well-dressed, with impeccable hair and a full smile, one of those that leaves no room for doubt. She seemed happy, but Walter knew Susan enough to notice an edge of something else, need to show. Oliver was beside her, shaking hands, talking loudly, making jokes. He seemed like the owner of the air. Walter thought about staying in a corner, eating something, fulfilling his presence and leaving. But as soon as Susan saw him, she straightened up and came toward him with a smile that, from afar, seemed like kindness. Up close, it wasn't. "Walter," she said, elongating the name like someone making a point of making it clear they remember. "You came. I received the invitation," he replied simply. Susan looked briefly at his clothes and then spoke with a voice too sweet. "I was in doubt if you would feel comfortable." Walter understood. It wasn't concern, it was provocation. I feel comfortable being myself, he replied without aggression. Susan gave a short smile. Of course, you've always been like that, right? Proud. Oliver appeared right behind, as if he had rehearsed the arrival. He hugged Susan by the waist and extended his hand to Walter. "Walter," he said loudly, so some around could hear. "What a surprise!" Walter shook his hand. "Congratulations," he said without excess. Oliver laughed. "Thank you. We're in a good phase. Well done work, right?" He looked at Susan like someone receiving applause. "And you? How's life on the ranch?" The question seemed curious, but the tone seemed like evaluation. "Working," Walter replied. Oliver tilted his head. "That's good. America needs people who work," and he completed with a smile. "But it also needs people who think big." Susan let out a little laugh. "Oliver, don't start." But Walter saw in her eyes that she wanted him to start. The three stood in silence for a moment, and it was in that moment that Walter realized Susan wasn't uncomfortable with his presence. She was happy with the chance to put him in comparison. Oliver then pointed to the garden. "Go there, make yourself comfortable. There are a lot of good people here. You can meet people, make contacts, maybe improve your business." Walter nodded and walked away, without hurry. He didn't want to fight, but every sentence was like a hand trying to slowly push him out of respect. Near the garden, he stopped to breathe. The grass was well trimmed, and there were small lights around. It seemed beautiful, but beauty, when used to humiliate, becomes cruel decoration. Walter heard a couple talking near a table. "Is that him?" the woman asked discreetly. "It's the ex," the man replied. "They say she improved her life. She made the right choice." The woman looked at Walter once more, as if he were proof. "Poor thing," she said. But it wasn't compassion, it was disguised superiority. Walter felt a tightness in his chest. It wasn't just for him, it was for so many people who work and are treated as if they were less for not looking important. He thought about leaving right that minute. That's when the organizer approached. It was the same woman from the clipboard. Now she seemed nervous. "Mr. Walter?" she asked. "Yes, my name is Roxanne. I need to speak with you quickly. It's a matter for today." Walter frowned. "About what?" Roxanne looked around, as if afraid someone would hear. "I can't explain here, but it's better if you come with me, please." Walter stood still for a second. The feeling of a trap returned. "Who told you to talk to me?" he asked. Roxanne hesitated and replied, "It was a request from the host, Oliver." Walter felt his stomach freeze. He wasn't there out of politeness. He was there because Oliver wanted him. He followed Roxanne through the house, passing groups that opened up to look, and without knowing why, Walter had the impression they were taking him not to a discreet corner, but to a place where everyone could see. Roxanne said it was a matter for today, but the chosen path seemed like the path of public humiliation. Roxanne took Walter to the main room, where Oliver was in the center of a large group. As soon as Walter appeared, Oliver opened a smile and raised his voice, like someone announcing an attraction. "Folks, look who came to honor us," Oliver said. "Walter." Some people turned at the same time. Susan, beside him, adjusted her smile like someone preparing for a photo. Walter felt his face heat up, not from shame for existing, but from realizing they were using his presence as part of the show. Oliver approached, keeping his voice loud. "Walter, I was telling folks how Susan is a strong woman, how she had the courage to start over." He paused and looked around. "Not everyone can leave a stagnant life, right?" The phrase was thrown like a stone, but wrapped in pretty paper. Susan put her hand on Oliver's arm. "Love, you don't need to." But her eyes said otherwise. "She wanted him to continue," Oliver continued. "And I really respect people who work on the ranch, you know, for real. But nowadays you can't live just on effort. You have to have vision. You have to have strategy." Walter remained silent. He could respond, but he knew any response would be used. A woman from the group asked, laughing lightly, "And you, Walter, do you still work with cattle?" Another man completed, "Must be a simple life, right?" And several laughed, as if simple was synonymous with inferior. Walter looked at Susan. She didn't defend, she didn't deflect. She was enjoying it. Oliver then raised his glass and said, "Since we're talking about starting over, let's do something beautiful here. Roxanne, where's that box you mentioned?" Roxanne appeared with a discreet donation box. Walter understood too late. Oliver spoke loudly for everyone to hear. "Today we're going to do a fundraiser, help for a good cause, and I thought it would be symbolic to start with Walter." Walter felt the floor change places. This was the perfect trap. Oliver turned to him. "Walter, are you up for starting? Any amount. What's important is to participate. That way everyone gets in the spirit." Susan tilted her head and smiled, like someone offering a chance at dignity, but actually offering a tight exit. If Walter donated little, he would become a joke. If he donated more, they would say he was trying to show off or that it was a lie. If he refused, he would be painted as stingy. The room fell silent. Even the background music seemed distant. Everyone waited for the moment when he would confirm the role of lesser. Walter breathed, took his wallet calmly and opened it. A smile almost appeared at the corner of Oliver's mouth, like someone who was already sure of the ending. But Walter didn't take out any money. He closed his wallet and spoke low, but firm enough to be heard by those who were close. "I respect donations, but I don't respect using donations to humiliate someone." Oliver's smile fell just a bit, and he tried to hide it by laughing. "What's that, Walter?" "It's a joke. We're among friends." Walter looked around. There were no friends. There was an audience. Susan then released a phrase, still with a smile. "Walter, you don't need to be nervous. No one is attacking you." And that's when Walter realized how humiliation works. First they push, then they say you fell because you wanted to. Oliver tried to deliver the final blow with a calm voice. "Look, if you can't, it's no problem. Not everyone can keep up with the pace, right? Life is like that." Some people laughed again, more contained, but they laughed. Walter felt like leaving, and maybe that's what they wanted, for him to leave with his head down, so Susan could say later that he couldn't handle it. He took a step back, ready to walk away. That's when a female voice, older, cut through the air firmly. "Enough." The group turned. A grey-haired lady, straight posture despite her age, was sitting further back. Walter had seen her before, but didn't know her. Now she was getting up slowly, with the dignity of someone who doesn't ask permission to defend what's right. "This isn't a joke," she said, looking directly at Oliver. "This is cruelty in beautiful clothes." Oliver was without reaction for a second, then tried to smile. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you may not have understood. The lady wasn't shaken. I understood very well, and I also understood why they made a point of bringing Walter here." Susan pressed her lips. "Who are you?" she asked, trying to maintain control. The lady looked at Susan with old weariness. "My name is Eleanor." Roxanne, the organizer, turned pale upon hearing the name, as if that changed rules she didn't know. Oliver swallowed hard. "Eleanor," he said now with less strength, "you came." Eleanor took a step forward. "I came because they asked me and I came out of respect. But respect is not to be used as decoration." Walter stood still, not understanding why that woman had authority over Oliver. Eleanor pointed to the donation box. "You planned a scene to diminish him, but there are things that aren't resolved with scenes, Oliver." The room fell into uncomfortable silence. People who had laughed before now avoided looking. Susan tried to recover the shine. "This is a party. If you have a personal problem, solve it later." Eleanor responded calmly. "The problem isn't personal, it's serious, and it's now." Walter felt a chill on the back of his neck. This looked like a matter that wasn't just about pride. Eleanor turned to Walter and spoke in a more human tone. "Walter, I'm very sorry you got into this, but I needed you to be here." Walter frowned. "I don't understand." "I don't even know you, ma'am." Eleanor nodded. "You're going to understand, and you're going to understand why they put you as a target." Oliver took a step forward, irritated and pale at the same time. "We're not doing this here," he said, trying to impose. "We'll talk later." Eleanor looked at him like someone giving one last chance. "You promised to solve it with dignity. You decided to turn the man into a joke. Now you're going to face the consequences without spectacle, since you love spectacle so much." Roxanne approached and whispered something in Oliver's ear. He became even whiter. Susan noticed and grabbed her husband's arm. "Oliver, what's happening?" she asked with a trembling voice for the first time. He pulled his arm, trying not to make a scene, but did. "It's nothing," he replied without conviction. Eleanor looked at Roxanne. "Have they arrived?" she asked. Roxanne, nervous, confirmed with a nod. Walter felt his heart accelerate. "They who?" Eleanor faced Oliver. "You wanted to humiliate Walter to hide what was happening, but hiding doesn't erase." Then Eleanor pointed to the door leading to the garden. "Open it!" Roxanne hesitated, but opened it. Walter looked outside and saw movement, people moving away, someone discreetly directing, as if waiting for an arrival. Susan went to the door, curious and suspicious, and her face changed. Walter didn't understand, but felt the night was about to turn inside out. Mrs. Eleanor seemed to command more in that house than the hosts themselves, and the reason was about to appear in the sky. In the garden, some people walked hurriedly, but without shouting. It was a type of controlled hurry, of those who want to solve something without drawing attention, and failed. Susan looked at Oliver as someone demanding an answer. "Oliver, speak. Why are there people organizing like this?" she asked. Oliver tried to smile, but his mouth didn't follow. "Must be some supplier, something from the party," he said without certainty. Eleanor interrupted. "Don't lie to your wife, Oliver. That's enough." Susan turned to Eleanor, irritated. "You have no right to talk to him like that." Eleanor replied without raising her voice. "I do, because I know what he did, and because I tried to prevent it from reaching this point." Walter took a step forward carefully. "Eleanor, I don't want confusion. I just want to understand why they called me here." Eleanor looked at him seriously. "You're a man from the ranch, Walter. You understand about fences, about limits, about right and wrong." She pointed discreetly at Oliver. He crossed the limit. Oliver took a deep breath and tried to take control. "Let's talk in a corner," he said, trying to appear in control. "We don't need to involve Walter. This is my business." Eleanor didn't give in. "No, you involved Walter when you decided to use his name the way you did, and when you decided to bring him here to serve as a distraction." Susan turned pale. "His name," she repeated. "Oliver, what is she talking about?" Oliver didn't respond. Walter felt his stomach tighten. "My name where?" he asked. Eleanor looked around, saw there were too many curious people, and even so spoke because there was no going back. "Walter, for some time people have been trying to mess with land in the region, and there are people who use documents and sweet talk to confuse simple people." She faced Oliver. He thought he could do this without anyone finding out. Walter became rigid. "Are you saying he messed with something of mine?" Walter asked, controlling his voice. Oliver responded quickly. "It's not that. Not the way she's saying it. I was just trying to resolve a situation." Eleanor didn't accept it. "A situation created by you." Susan put her hand to her mouth, scared. "Oliver," she whispered, "you told me everything was fine, that it was just work." Oliver looked at her, irritated, as if she were getting in the way. "I'm trying to solve it, Susan. You don't understand these things." Susan took her hand off his arm, then explained so I can understand. Walter noticed the change. Susan, who until minutes before smiled with superiority, now had fear of being on the wrong side, and fear that her perfect life had cracks. Eleanor looked back at Walter. I asked them to call you because I knew he would try to avoid you, and I knew he would try to make you look small so no one would listen to you." Walter breathed slowly. He felt anger, but also a strange clarity. Everything made sense. The invitation, the misunderstanding, the provocation. Oliver tried to approach Walter with a more friendly, false tone. "Walter, look, don't take it that way. We can talk like men. I even thought about helping you, making a deal." Walter looked at him. "Help me with what? I didn't even ask for anything." Oliver swallowed hard. "You know, these ranch things are difficult. Sometimes there's a lack of guidance. I have contacts," Walter realized. Oliver was trying to buy silence with humiliation and then with false generosity. Eleanor pointed at Oliver firmly. "The deal he wants is simple. He wants Walter to sign something he shouldn't. He wants him to confirm a paper that isn't his." Susan took a step back, as if she had taken an invisible push. "Oliver, did you do this?" she asked. Oliver raised his hands. "I didn't force anyone. I just anticipated a process. It was going to work. It was going to work." Walter felt his heart beat faster. "And why me?" Walter asked. "Why my name?" Eleanor replied. "Because you're seen as a simple man and because you've already had difficulties. He bet that you would enter a party like this, hear jokes, be without reaction, and accept anything to get out of there in peace." Oliver looked at Walter with anger. "That's exaggeration," he said. "You're making drama." Eleanor pointed to the garden where the movement increased. "The drama isn't in here. The drama is you thinking you can deceive and still laugh at the other." Walter looked outside. People were moving away as if opening space for something big, and some were looking up, like those waiting for something in the sky. Susan followed the gaze and was confused. "What is this?" she asked, almost voiceless. "Why are they looking up?" Roxanne, the organizer, appeared again, clearly shaken. "Eleanor, it's arriving," she said. Oliver closed his eyes for a second, as if trying to wake up from a bad dream. Walter felt his throat dry. "Arriving who?" he asked. Eleanor looked at him with respect that Walter wasn't used to receiving at rich parties. "The person who will clarify what is yours and what isn't, and the person who will prove in front of everyone that you're not the small man they tried to invent in here." Walter frowned. "I didn't ask for any proof, Eleanor." "I know," she said. "But sometimes we don't choose the stage. We only choose how to stand on it." At that instant, a shadow passed through the garden, and the tree leaves moved in a different way. It wasn't collective imagination. It was a real presence approaching. People began to go outside, pulled by curiosity. Even those who had laughed before now walked silently, with serious expressions, because when something gets out of control, laughter dies. Walter also went outside slowly, without hurry to appear. Susan went behind with a tense face, trying to understand what kind of surprise was about to explode in her life. Oliver stayed last, like someone who wants to stay inside the house so as not to be seen falling from the sky. A helicopter approached to land in the open space of the lawn, with precision that made it clear it wasn't improvised. Walter stopped, looking, not understanding why that was there. Susan looked at Oliver with desperate hope, as if saying, "It was you, right?" But Oliver didn't celebrate. He just turned paler. Susan thought that helicopter was another trick from Oliver to impress, until she realized Oliver seemed scared. The helicopter descended on the lawn calmly, as if that arrival had been arranged a long time ago. People stayed at a respectful distance, forming a circle. No one spoke loudly. The party atmosphere had completely disappeared. Walter stood still with his hands at his sides, trying to put the puzzle together. Eleanor approached him and spoke low. "Walter, I know this seems strange, but I need you to keep your head in place. Don't respond to provocation. Just look and listen." Walter nodded, still confused. Susan was a bit behind, with a hard face. She didn't know if she felt fear, anger, or shame. Probably all three. Oliver, in turn, seemed like a man diminished by his own mask. He tried to straighten his posture, but couldn't. The helicopter's presence left him without ground. The helicopter door opened. A man descended first in simple clothes, but with the posture of someone used to solving things seriously. He looked around, evaluating the place and the people. Then he walked around and extended his hand to help another person descend. Walter narrowed his eyes. When the second person put their feet on the lawn, many people were without reaction because they didn't seem like someone from there, didn't seem like a party guest, seemed like someone who came to fulfill a task. Eleanor took a step forward and spoke with respect. "Thank you for coming." The person responded with a discreet gesture, like someone who doesn't want attention. Susan looked at Walter and for the first time that night didn't find his gaze with irony, found it with distrust. "Walter, did you know about this?" she asked. Walter answered the truth. "No." Susan turned to Oliver. "Then why is this helicopter here?" she insisted. "Oliver!" Oliver opened his mouth and couldn't speak. The man who descended first from the helicopter walked toward Walter and stopped a few steps away. He looked at him with respect and said, "Mr. Walter." Walter felt a shock, not from being called by name, but from Sir said seriously without mockery. "That's me," Walter replied. The man nodded as if confirming something important. "I need to speak with you here, in the presence of the people who made this gathering." Susan widened her eyes. "Gathering?" she repeated, almost breathless. "This is a gathering." Eleanor looked at Susan firmly. "This has always been a gathering. You just tried to disguise it as a party." Walter looked at Eleanor, trying to understand. Eleanor approached him and said low, "Of course, Walter, I promised your father many years ago that if one day someone tried to step over you, I wouldn't stay silent. I couldn't help your father with everything back then, but today I can help you." Walter felt his heart tighten. His father had died early, and few people remembered him with this respect. "My father knew you?" Walter asked. Eleanor nodded. He knew and trusted. Susan heard and was confused, as if Walter's past, which she always treated as something small, suddenly gained size. The man from the helicopter took out an envelope and a thin folder without showing too much, just holding carefully. Oliver took a step forward, trying to interrupt. "This is exaggeration. We'll solve this later. We don't need to—" Eleanor raised her hand, telling Oliver to be quiet without shouting. "No, Oliver, today you don't choose the later." The man then said something that made the silence even heavier. "Walter, before anything, I need to confirm information. The helicopter is yours. It's in your name." Susan froze. Some people put their hands to their chests. Others exchanged quick glances, like those who realized they laughed too soon. Walter blinked, as if the world had changed without warning. Then he understood what was happening. That night had been set up for him to leave there embarrassed, asking for help, apologizing for existing. But now the game had turned in a way no one expected. Susan looked at Walter as if she were seeing a stranger. "Yours?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "This helicopter is yours?" Walter still didn't answer, because the answer there was bigger than a word. It was an entire story, a story he didn't tell anyone out of pride, out of caution, and out of tiredness of judgment. Oliver, beside him, seemed about to lose his voice. Walter finally breathed and took a step forward, going toward the helicopter, as if his body had decided before his mind. And when he walked, people opened space, not out of fear, out of sudden respect. Walter stopped near the open door, looked inside for a second, and then turned his face to the garden full of eyes. Susan was there, motionless, with a dead smile. Oliver too. Eleanor watched everything firmly. Walter opened his mouth to speak, but Eleanor put her hand on his arm, like someone saying, "Calm down, now is the right time." And at that exact moment, Walter realized that the biggest shock of that night hadn't been said out loud yet. Walter was not only the owner of the helicopter, but also had in his hands the only way out for a problem that Oliver hid behind the humiliation. She would discover too late who she had married. The man who had descended first from the helicopter held the folder firmly, but without hurry. He didn't seem nervous, just attentive. Beside him, the second person who descended, now more visible, was Jared. Jared was wearing the same clothes as always, simple, clean, straight posture. But that night he didn't have the look of someone who came to serve tables. He had the look of someone who came to protect what is just. Walter looked at Jared as someone trying to understand if he was awake. Jared nodded discreetly as if saying, "That's right, I came." Susan kept looking at the two, confused. The image she had in her head was old. Walter as a limited man, stuck to the ranch, living in hardship. But there, before her, was a Walter surrounded by respect, and a Jared who didn't lower his head to anyone. Oliver tried to speak, but his voice came out broken. This is ridiculous. You're setting up theatre." Eleanor turned slowly and faced Oliver, like someone who has already seen many people trying to save themselves with ready-made phrases. "Theatre is what you did in there. Out here it's just the truth appearing." Walter, who until then had been more observing than speaking, took a deep breath. His throat was dry, not from fear, but from tiredness. Tiredness of being put in the role of less, without anyone asking who he really was. He looked at Susan. Her face had changed. It was no longer that smile of victory. It was a mixture of shock and shame. "Susan," Walter called in a low tone, without attacking. "I didn't come here to humiliate you, but I'm also not going to accept being humiliated." Susan didn't respond. Her mouth opened and closed, as if words were missing. Eleanor then signaled to the man with the folder. "You can start," she said. The man took a step forward and spoke calmly for everyone to hear. "I'm here to register an agreement that was already attempted privately and wasn't fulfilled, and also to ensure that no one signs anything under pressure." Several guests moved uncomfortably. The party that seemed chic now looked serious, and serious things don't go with little laughs. Oliver raised his chin, trying to recover dominance. "I don't owe explanations to these people." Eleanor pointed to the circle around. "You do because you used these people to feel bigger. Now these people will see who you are when there's no applause." Walter felt the weight of that moment. He knew that from there, nothing would go back to being as before. But for the first time that night, he didn't feel weak about it. He felt free. The man opened the folder and showed some papers without detailing too much, just enough to make it clear there was documentation. "Walter, I need you to confirm 2 things, he said. "First, you didn't authorize anyone to use your name in any negotiation." Walter responded without hesitation. "I didn't authorize." "Second, do you recognize this agreement proposal as something they tried to push on you today?" Walter looked at Eleanor, then at Oliver and said, "I recognize it. They tried to put me in a tight situation so I would accept anything." Susan put her hand to her chest. "Oliver," she whispered again, as if calling her husband back to the version she thought existed. Oliver ignored her look and tried to attack Walter with irony, but the irony no longer had strength. "So, Walter, now you became rich. Is that what you came to show? A helicopter to make a joke?" Walter felt inside the old urge to swallow and stay quiet. It was a habit. But he remembered Irene's phrase, "Pretending it didn't hurt gets tiring." He responded simply, "It's not to make a joke, it's to work. I use it to see the lands, to speed up what's needed, to not depend on favors. And I didn't come to show. I came because they called me." Eleanor completed firmly. "They called for him to sign what he shouldn't, and they called with humiliation so he would think he deserved that." The murmur crossed the circle, and as happens when truth arrives, many people began to remember their own words inside the party. Poor thing. The simple one, too small to dream big. Walter saw some gazes deflecting and didn't feel pleasure in it. He felt only a calm sadness. It was impressive how people err easily when they think there will be no consequence. Jared took a step beside Walter and spoke without shouting, but with presence. "Boss, I brought everything." He handed Walter a smaller, well-organized folder. Susan looked at that and swallowed hard. Oliver tried to move forward to grab it, but Eleanor placed herself in the middle like a barrier. "Don't even think about it," she said. "Dry." Oliver stopped because he realized he was losing control. And when a man like Oliver loses control, he reveals himself. He pointed at Walter with anger. "You've always been this, a ranchman wanting to act important. Susan made the right choice in choosing me." The phrase came out loud, cruel, and it was a mistake, because by saying that, Oliver delivered in front of everyone that it wasn't just business, it was contempt. Walter was motionless for a second. The humiliation from before tried to return as memory, but now there was something different. There were witnesses. There was Eleanor. There was Jared. There was truth already landed on the lawn. Walter looked at Susan with sad respect. "Susan, I'm not going to argue with him, but I need you to understand one thing. What he's doing today, he'll do again with anyone when he needs to save himself." Susan breathed fast, as if the air had become scarce, and Eleanor ended that moment with a phrase that fell like a stone. "Now you're going to hear the reason for this gathering, and why this house, this party, and this marriage were used as a curtain." When Eleanor explained the reason, Susan would discover that her new life was at risk and that Oliver knew from the beginning. Eleanor asked everyone to come a little closer, but without confusion. The circle became tighter. The lawn seemed smaller, as if truth occupied space. She looked first at Susan, not with anger, but seriously. "Susan, I'm going to speak carefully. You were brought here thinking it was a celebration, but you were also brought to serve as social proof for everyone to see that Oliver is well, is firm, is above any suspicion." Susan shook her head slowly, like someone who denies because they don't want to believe. "I don't understand," she said. "Oliver always took care of everything." Oliver laughed nervously. "Oh, great. Now it's going to turn into a speech to turn my wife against me." Eleanor wasn't shaken. "You did it yourself when you decided to use humiliation as a tool." She then pointed to the house, illuminated, beautiful. This house was bought in a hurry, with promises, with sweet talk, and with money that didn't close the account. Oliver raised his voice. "That's a lie." Eleanor faced him firmly. "Then prove it." Oliver was silent because the proof wasn't on his side. The man with the folder who was conducting the procedure spoke carefully, without too difficult terms. There was a payment agreement that wasn't fulfilled, and there was an attempt to transfer responsibility to third parties without authorization. Walter heard that and felt a cold in his stomach. So that was it. Oliver was trying to throw the weight on someone, and he chose him. Susan looked at Walter. For the first time, her voice came out low, without venom. "He tried to put it on you?" Walter responded calmly. "He tried to put me in a corner so I would sign what isn't mine." "I didn't sign." Susan turned pale, then looked at Oliver, demanding explanation. "Oliver, speak. Are you in debt?" she asked. Oliver made a gesture with his hand as if that was small. "Everyone has debt. That's normal." Eleanor responded right away. "Debt is normal. Deceiving isn't." She took a step forward and said something that made the guests move. "And it's not just debt. It's the way he tries to get out of it." Oliver gave a crooked smile, trying to humiliate Eleanor now. "You've always liked to command, haven't you? You always thought you owned the truth." Eleanor took a deep breath and replied, "I don't own the truth. I just don't make deals with lies." She then turned to Walter. "Walter, your father came to me many years ago. He was afraid of losing land because of smart people. And I taught him one thing: never sign anything in a hurry and never argue with those who want an audience." Walter swallowed hard. The memory of his father came strong. After your father passed, I continued following from afar. I saw you fall, I saw you get up, I saw you learn. And when you started selling better, negotiating better, I saw you had the main thing, character. Susan heard that word as if it hurt, because for a long time she confused character with lack of ambition. Eleanor continued. One day, Oliver appeared in the region trying to invest, trying to gather people, trying to buy cheap land. He spoke beautifully. I warned some people. He diverted to others. Oliver interrupted. What are you accusing me of? Be careful what you say. Eleanor just looked at him and said, I'm saying that you use appearance as a tool, and that when the bill arrives, you look for someone to pay in your place. The man with the folder confirmed carefully. Mr. Oliver tried to obtain Mr. Walter's signature to validate a transfer that wasn't authorized. Susan closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, she seemed smaller. So this party, Susan began, Eleanor completed, was to make you happy. Yes, but it was also to attract Walter, embarrass him, and try to solve it here on the basis of just sign and go. Walter felt anger rise, but held it. He didn't want to become what they expected of him, an explosive man. He wanted to be what Irene taught without saying, firm. Oliver tried to change the game, pointing at the helicopter. And him who's playing saint, who guarantees that all this money is clean. The accusation was low, made to create doubt. Many people looked at Walter waiting for a reaction. Walter didn't shout, just responded, my work guarantees, my story guarantees, and I don't need to prove this to those who only know how to talk. Jared beside him completed without aggression. Those who know Walter know, and those who don't know will know today. Eleanor then looked at Susan again, and her phrase came as a warning. Susan, you need to understand. If you continue on his side without asking, you can fall together, not because you're guilty, but because he has no limits when he needs to save himself. Susan was trembling, but tried to maintain dignity. I didn't know, she said. I swear I didn't know. Walter heard that and inside felt two things at the same time, pity and distance. Pity because it was true she seemed not to know, distance because even without knowing, she chose to humiliate. Oliver saw Susan weaken and changed his tone, now sweeter, as if he were another man. Susan, don't listen to this. They're against us. I'll solve everything. I always solved. Susan looked at him and for the first time asked a question she should have asked before. Solve how, Oliver? Oliver opened his mouth and didn't respond, and Eleanor, with a calm voice, finished the part that was missing. He solves by putting the other in front. Walter felt the night was going to turn completely, but the twist that Eleanor had promised was still missing, the one that would make everyone understand why the helicopter wasn't exhibitionism. Eleanor pointed to the smaller folder that Jared brought. Walter, now it's your time to speak, but speak only what's necessary. Walter held the folder, breathed and looked at the circle. Some guests were ashamed of having laughed, others were curious, and there were those who still wanted to see Walter fail. He opened the folder slowly. I'm going to speak what's necessary, Walter said, because my life isn't a spectacle, but I'm not going to let anyone use my name. When Walter showed what was in that folder, Oliver would realize that the biggest trap of the night wasn't against Walter. Walter took out a document and held it firmly, without shaking in the wind. He didn't read everything, just pointed to the parts that mattered in a simple way. I spent 2 years silent, Walter began. After the separation, I heard a lot of things. I heard I was small. I heard I wasn't going to get anywhere. I didn't respond because I was busy working. Susan pressed her lips. The memory of her laughter in the room was still alive and now hurt in herself. Walter continued. I reorganized my ranch. I stopped buying on impulse. I improved the herd. I learned to sell without hurry, and I started to save. Oliver made a gesture of disdain, but without strength. Save, Walter repeated, not to appear, to have freedom. Eleanor watched like a teacher who sees the student finally speak without fear. Walter raised another paper. I also partnered with serious people from right here, producers who work like me. We joined forces to buy better, sell better, and not be taken advantage of. Some older guests nodded. That made sense to those who know hard life. Oliver tried to interrupt. That doesn't prove anything. Walter looked at him calmly. It does prove, because it proves I'm not an easy man to pressure. The man with the folder, who was conducting the procedure, asked, Walter, please explain the relationship of this with today's case. Walter nodded. I'll explain. He looked at Susan for a second. Susan, when you left, I thought I had lost. Many people thought so. But I lost a marriage. I didn't lose my dignity, and I decided that no one would step on what's mine anymore. Susan swallowed hard. Her eyes shone, but she tried to hold it. Walter returned to the point. A few months ago, Oliver came to me through third parties without coming directly. He wanted to buy a piece of my land or do business his way. I said no, and he didn't accept. Oliver opened his mouth, nervous. Lie, I never... Eleanor cut. Did you come looking? Yes, and I saw. Oliver was silent again. Walter continued. After that, conversations started appearing in town, people saying I was broke, that I needed to sell. And today, at this party, he tried to confirm that in front of everyone. He paused, looking at the faces. He didn't just want to buy land. He wanted me to feel small, so I would accept anything. Susan lowered her eyes. Walter raised the main paper. The problem is that while he was preparing humiliation, I prepared protection. I asked Eleanor for help because my father trusted her and she accepted. Eleanor nodded, and I asked Jared to bring everything because I knew today could be the day they would try to use my name. Jared firm just said, I won't let them. The man with the folder then asked directly, and the helicopter? Walter responded, I bought it for work, to speed up inspections, to take medicine in case of emergency, to save time without depending on bad roads. It's not luxury for me, it's a tool. Oliver laughed, but it was a laugh without joy. Tool? Of course. Walter didn't bite the bait. He continued, but today it became proof. Because I asked this team to come here to ensure no one would pressure me in a hidden corner and then say I signed of my own free will. Eleanor completed. Exactly, everything transparent. Oliver realized the word transparent had turned against him. Susan, trembling, asked, So what's going to happen now? The man with the folder responded calmly. Now, Mr. Oliver will have to answer for what he tried to do and will have to fulfill the agreement the right way without pushing it on another. Oliver raised his voice, finally losing his mask. You can't do this to me in front of everyone. Eleanor responded cold and fair. You can humiliate a man in front of everyone, but can't be charged in front of everyone. You chose the stage. Oliver looked around, looking for support. He didn't find it even among friends, because friends of people like him like the party, but run from the problem. He then turned to Susan, trying the last resort. Susan, say something. Are you going to let this happen to me? Susan was paralyzed. She looked at Walter, then at Oliver, and for the first time seemed to see the difference. Walter was firm without putting on a show. Oliver was putting on a show without firmness. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. Walter saw that and felt a tightness, not from wanting to go back, but from memory. One day he and Susan had a simple dream, but she traded simple for shine. And shine, when it goes out, leaves darkness. Eleanor then said something that changed everything. Susan, before you make any decision, you need to know something. Oliver not only tried to use Walter's name, he also put you at risk. Susan widened her eyes. Me? She asked. Oliver took a desperate step forward. Don't make things up. Eleanor wasn't intimidated. "It's not made up. It's here." She pointed to the man's folder. "There are papers where your name appears associated with the agreement. You may not have even understood, but he put you in as part." Susan turned white. "Oliver, did you make me sign something?" she asked with a weak voice. Oliver shook his head quickly, like someone trying to deny before the fact is born. "I just asked for a signature for house things," he said, tangled. Susan put her hand to her mouth. Walter closed his eyes for a moment. The unexpected twist was here. The humiliation wasn't just to crush Walter, it was to save Oliver using Walter. And if it went wrong, use Susan too. Walter opened his eyes and spoke with calm firmness. "Susan, I'm not going to attack you, but you need to stop protecting yourself with lies. If you signed without reading, that's dangerous." And he counted on that. Susan began to cry, but holding her face, trying not to fall apart in front of the guests. And at that moment the roles changed hands. Before, Susan had power because she was in the right place with the right man. Now she was vulnerable because the right man had feet of clay. Susan thought Walter would take revenge, but his decision that night would surprise even Eleanor. The atmosphere was heavy. The guests no longer seemed like guests. They seemed like witnesses to something that wouldn't have a way back. Oliver became smaller with each second, not because someone pushed him, but because truth takes the air from those who live on appearance. Susan, crying softly, tried to recompose herself. She looked at Walter with a different type of fear that he wanted to destroy what was left of her. Walter saw this fear, and for a second remembered Susan from the beginning, the girl who laughed for real, who ate with him at the small table, who spoke of the future with clean shine. That Susan no longer existed, but the memory still hurt. Eleanor approached Walter and spoke low. "Now is the time for you to decide how this ends. You have strength to squeeze, and you have strength to release, but do it your way." Walter nodded. Oliver, perceiving the risk, changed strategy again. He tried to show himself as a victim. "Walter, let's talk. We can solve this. I'll pay you. I'll make a better deal. What do you want? Want money? Want to appear? Want her back?" The last phrase was low, cruel and dirty, said to hurt Susan and provoke Walter at the same time. Susan raised her head immediately. "How do you have the courage to say that?" she said now with anger mixed with crying. Oliver continued trying to take Walter out of control. "Going to say you don't want. She left you and now you come with a helicopter to make a scene. This is wounded pride." Walter felt his blood boil, not from wanting her back, but from Oliver's attempt to transform everything into a cheap emotional game. He took a step forward. The circle became tense. Many people expected an explosion, but Walter spoke low with precision. "Oliver, you don't know how to differentiate firmness from hatred. I'm not here for her. I'm here for me and for my name." Oliver laughed, nervous. "Your name doesn't fill your stomach." Walter responded, "It does. Because a clean name opens doors, a dirty name closes paths. You live as if that doesn't matter. That's why you're like this." The silence was total. Susan looked at Walter as if she had never seen that type of strength in him. It wasn't shouting strength, it was character strength. The man with the folder interrupted. Formal, but simple. "We need to define now. Does Mr. Walter want to register a complaint for the attempted improper transfer and wish to proceed with charging Mr. Oliver's agreement in the terms already presented?" Oliver turned pale. He understood it wasn't just shame, it was consequence. Walter took a deep breath. Everyone expected revenge. It was the easiest script. It was the ending that goes with humiliation. Return humiliation. But Walter wasn't Oliver. He looked at Susan and asked calmly, "Susan, did you really not know?" Susan shook her head desperately. "I didn't know. I swear." He told me everything was normal, that it was house papers, that it was to organize. I trusted. I thought I finally had someone who took care. She cried, "I was foolish. I was cruel to you, and I was foolish with him." Walter felt his chest tighten, not from blind pity, from sad understanding. He looked at Eleanor. Eleanor didn't interfere. She just observed, respecting his decision. Walter turned his eyes to the man with the folder. "I want this to be registered," Walter said. "I want my name off any paper, and I want it to be clear they tried to pressure me." Oliver closed his eyes. Walter continued, "But I also don't want Susan to pay for what she didn't do." Susan raised her face immediately. Oliver opened his eyes, surprised. He expected cruelty. He didn't expect justice. Walter completed firmly, "So I want her to be guided to protect herself, because she was put in this without understanding. And I want the agreement to be charged from whoever made the debt, from whoever tried to push it on others." Eleanor nodded, satisfied, not with Oliver's suffering, but with Walter's clarity. The man with the folder agreed. "It's possible to separate responsibilities. Yes, and it's important that she doesn't sign anything else without understanding." Susan breathed as if she had come out from underwater. Oliver, realizing he would fall alone, tried to pull Susan back. "Susan, you're not going to abandon me now. You're my wife." Susan looked at him with silent disgust. It wasn't just anger. It was the feeling of having been used. "I was your wife," she corrected for the first time with courage, "but I'm not your shield." Oliver took a step toward her. "You're embarrassing me." Susan responded with a trembling but firm voice. "You embarrassed yourself when you thought you could step on good people and call that smart." The circle around fell silent, but some faces showed approval, not from enjoying the fight, but because finally someone was calling things by their name. Walter felt a weight lift from his chest. It wasn't joy, it was relief. He then looked at the guests, many still standing, not knowing what to do with their own previous laughter. "I don't wish anyone harm," Walter said. "But I learned one thing. Those who measure others by appearance will one day be measured by truth." Many people lowered their eyes. Eleanor took a step forward and spoke to the circle. "Whoever wants to leave can go. The party is over. What will continue here is only what needs to continue, the truth and the right papers." Some began to leave slowly without loud comments. The event air had become learning air. Susan stood there, not knowing where to go. The house, which before was a symbol of victory, now seemed like a prison. She looked at Walter and spoke almost in a whisper. "I treated you as less." Walter responded without aggression. "You treated me as less because you thought that made you big." Susan closed her eyes and cried again. Walter continued, "I'm not going back, not because I hate, but because I learned to respect myself." Susan felt broken, but I understand. And Oliver, realizing he had lost both games, the financial and the emotional, Oliver would still try one last blow, but he didn't know the biggest trump of that night wasn't the helicopter. Most of the guests had already left. Few remained. Eleanor, Walter, Jared, Roxanne in the distance, and Susan. Oliver also stayed because he no longer had anywhere to run within his own story. The man with the folder collected necessary signatures to register what had happened, always calmly, explaining without complicating. Oliver tried one last maneuver, approached the man with the folder, and spoke in a low tone, wanting to seem reasonable. "We can solve this without registration. I'll pay. I'll make a bigger deal. I don't want this staining my name." Eleanor heard and responded before the man. "You worry about your name now? You used others' names as if they were objects." Oliver turned to Walter, trying to appeal. "Walter, you know how it is. Life has ups and downs. Today I'm down. Tomorrow I can be up. We can be allies." Walter looked at him and responded directly. "I don't make alliances with those who humiliate to win." Oliver clenched his fists, irritated. "You're full of yourself," he said. Walter responded, simply, "I'm finding myself." The phrase wasn't said to hurt, it was said as truth. Susan heard that and seemed to feel an internal blow because she realized Walter hadn't changed for money. He had changed from maturity, and that was something she couldn't buy back. Jared approached Walter and spoke low. "Boss, your mother called. She asked if everything went well." The memory of Irene brought warmth to Walter's chest. "Tell her I'm coming back soon and that I'm fine," Walter replied. Susan heard my mother without it being said, and that made her remember when she also felt part of that simple house. She lowered her head and spoke. "Irene must have suffered with me too." Walter responded honestly. "She suffered, but she never wished you harm. She just wished you wouldn't get lost." Susan closed her eyes. The shame was great, but for the first time it seemed like shame that teaches, not shame that destroys. Eleanor called Susan closer, with the firmness of someone who knows how to guide without humiliating. "Susan, you're going to need to protect yourself today, without fighting, without theatre, just with clarity. You're going to read everything, understand everything, and you're not going to sign anything else without someone trustworthy." Susan nodded, trembling. Oliver tried to interfere. "She stays with me. This is husband and wife business." Eleanor responded, "No, now it's truth and consequence business." Oliver took a step forward, irritated. "You think you can command in my house?" Walter looked at the illuminated house, at the tables still set, at the decorations that had lost their meaning. And then he said something that was the last twist, the most silent and the strongest. "Oliver, I didn't come to command in your house. I came to prevent you from commanding my life. But there's one thing you still haven't understood." Oliver frowned. "What?" Walter pointed to Eleanor with respect. "It was she who gave you the chance to solve this without exposure. You refused. You preferred to humiliate. So she did what she promised my father. Not to stay silent," Eleanor added. "And there's more. You thought the helicopter was the symbol of Walter's wealth, but it's not." Oliver laughed with tired mockery. "So what is it?" Walter responded, looking into his eyes. "It's the symbol that I no longer depend on your approval." The silence came heavy. Susan cried again, but now with another pain. The pain of realizing she tried to erase a good man, and the good man didn't erase. He just lit up inside. Oliver, seeing he had no victory there, tried to turn his back, but the man with the folder called him. "Mr. Oliver, before leaving, I need you to confirm you understood the conditions and that you'll be charged for what is your responsibility." Oliver stopped, breathed heavily and responded with anger. "I understood," and he left inside the house, not as a host, but as someone who lost his own stage. Susan stayed on the lawn, hugging her arms, as if she were cold, even without cold. She looked at Walter and said, "I wish I could go back in time." Walter responded calmly, "Time doesn't go back, but life teaches. If you learn, that's already something." Susan nodded, swallowing the cry. "I owe you an apology," she said. Walter looked at her without hardness. "Forgiveness doesn't erase what was done, but it can prevent you from repeating it." Susan took a deep breath. "I repeated," she said. "I humiliated you to feel better. I became what I myself was afraid of being, an empty person." Eleanor put her hand on Susan's shoulder. "You still have time to be different, but you need to stop running after shine and start running after peace." Susan nodded. Walter then picked up his folder, looked at Jared, and signaled to go. Before leaving, he said the last phrase to Susan, without promise, without romance, just with humanity. "I hope you'll be well, but be well for real, not to show anyone," Susan cried, but this time didn't try to hold it. "Thank you for not crushing me," she said. Walter responded, "I don't want to be like those who hurt me." He walked to the helicopter with Jared, without hurry, not to show off, but because that was the way back to real life. Eleanor stood watching with a mix of pride and relief. She knew she had fulfilled the promise to Walter's father, and knew Walter had fulfilled something even more difficult, not becoming bitter. When the helicopter lifted to leave, Walter looked one last time at the lawn and saw Susan, small, but not small like humiliation, small like someone who finally understood that no one grows by stepping on others. And there ended what needed to end. Walter returned to the ranch, and upon seeing Irene on the porch, felt his chest light. Irene looked at her son and asked just one thing. "Did you maintain yourself?" Walter responded. "I maintained myself." Irene nodded and didn't need to say anything else, because in the end what Walter won wasn't a party victory. It was a victory that doesn't make noise. The dignity of someone who survived humiliation without losing their own soul. If you made it to the end, comment the word dignity below. Just one word, so I know who stayed until the last scene. And if you liked the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Thank you very much for listening until here.